"What are you doing?" he gasped, drawing the Sig Sauer 9mm with practiced ease. His sister barely spared him a glance. "Quiet, you big ape. Louis the love machine is on. He ain't so tough, I could take him." Butler blinked. She was talking gibberish. Obviously drugged. "Let's go. Artemis wants us upstairs in the situations room." Juliet pointed a manicured finger at the wall. "Artemis can wait. This is for the Intercontinental title. And it's a grudge match." Louis ate the Hogman's pet piggy. The manservant studied the wall. It was definitely blank. He didn't have time for this. "Right. Let's go," he growled, slinging his sister over a broad shoulder. "No, you big bully," she protested, hammering his back with tiny fists. "Not now. Hogman." Butler ignored the objections, settling into a loping run. Who the hell was this Hogman person? One of her boyfriends, no doubt. He was going to keep closer tabs on callers to the lodge in future. "Butler. Pick up." It was Artemis, on the handheld. Butler jiggled his sister up a foot so he could reach his belt. "Lollipops," barked his employer. "Say again. I thought you said, I mean, get out of there." Take cover, take cover, take cover." The military term didn't sound right coming out of Master Artemis's mouth. Like a diamond ring in a lucky bag. "Take cover." "Yes, Butler. Cover. I thought speaking in primal terms would be the quickest route to your cognitive functions. Obviously I was mistaken. That was more like it." Butler scanned the hall for a nook to duck into. Not much choice. The only shelter was provided by the suits of medieval armor punctuating the walls. The manservant ducked into the alcove behind a 14th-century knight, complete with lance and mace. Juliet tapped the breastplate. "You think you're mean. I could take you with one hand." "Quiet," hissed Butler. He held his breath and listened. Something was approaching the main door. Something big. Butler leaned out far enough to get one eye on the lobby. ... Then you could say that the doorway exploded. But that particular verb doesn't do the action justice. Rather, it shattered into infinitesimal pieces. Butler had seen something like this once before when a Force 7 earthquake had rippled through a Colombian drug lord's estate seconds before he had been scheduled to blow it up. This was slightly different. More localized. Very professional. It was classic anti-terrorist tactics. Hit them with smoke and sonics, then go in while the targets were disoriented. Whatever was coming, it would be bad. He was certain of it. He was absolutely right. Dust clouds settled slowly, depositing a pale sheet on the Tunisian rug. Madame Fowl would have been furious, if she ever put so much as a toe outside the attic door. Butler's instincts told him to move. Zigzag across the ground floor, make for the higher ground. Stay low to minimize the target. This would be the perfect time to do it, before visibility cleared. Any second now, a hail of bullets would be whistling through the archway, and the last place he wanted to be was pinned down on a lower level. And on any other day Butler would have moved. He would have been halfway up that stairway before his brain had time for second thoughts. But today he had his baby sister over his shoulder spouting gibberish, and the last thing he wanted to do was expose her to murderous assault fire. With Juliet in the state she was in, she'd probably challenge the fairy commandos to a tag wrestling match. And though his sister talked tough, she was just a kid, really. No match for trained military personnel. So Butler hunkered down, propped Juliet against a tapestry behind a suit of armor, and checked his safety catch. Off. Good. Come and get me, fairy boys. Something moved in the dust haze. It was immediately obvious to Butler that the something wasn't human. The manservant had been on too many safaris not to recognize an animal when he saw it. He studied the creature's gait. Possibly simian. Similar upper body structure to an ape, but bigger than any primate Butler had ever seen. If it was an ape, then his handgun wasn't going to be of much use. You could put 5 rounds in the skull of a bull ape and he'd still have time to eat you before his brain realized he was dead. But it wasn't an ape. Apes didn't have night eyes. This creature did. Glowing crimson pupils, half hidden behind shaggy forelocks. Tusks too, but not elephantine. These were curved, with serrated edges. Gutting weapons. Butler felt a tingle low in his stomach. He'd had the feeling once before. On his first day at the Swiss Academy. It was fear. The creature stepped clear of the dust haze. Butler gasped. Again, his first since the academy. This was like no adversary he'd ever faced before. The manservant realized instantly what the fairies had done. They had sent in a primal hunter. A creature with no interest in magic or rules. A thing that would simply kill anything in its way, regardless of species. This was the perfect predator. That much was clear from the meat-ripping points on its teeth, from the dried gore crusted beneath its claws, and from the distilled hatred spilling from its eyes. The troll shambled forward, squinting through the chandelier light. Yellowed claws scraped along the marble tiling, throwing up sparks in their wake. It was sniffing now, snorting curious breaths, head cocked to one side. Butler had seen that pose before, on the snouts of starved pit bulls, just before their Russian handlers set them loose on a bear hunt. The shaggy head froze, its snout pointed directly at Butler's hiding place. It was no coincidence. The manservant peeked out between the chain mail fingers of a gauntlet. Now came the stalk. Once a scent had been acquired, the predator would attempt a slow silent approach, with light, thought Holly. The helmet high beams worked before, there was no reason why they wouldn't work again. It was too late for the male, he was a bag of broken bones. But the female, she still had a few seconds left before the troll split her open. Holly spiraled down through the faux light, searching her helmet console for the Sonics button. Sonics was generally used on canines, but in this case it might provide a moment's distraction. Enough to get her to ground level. The troll was reaching in toward Juliet underhand. It was a move generally reserved for the defenseless. The claws would curl in below the ribs, rupturing the heart. Minimum damage to the flesh and no last-minute tension to toughen the meat. Holly activated her sonics, and nothing happened. Not good. Generally your average troll would be at the very least irritated by the ultra-high frequency tone. But this particular beast didn't even shake his shaggy head. There were a couple of possibilities. 1, the helmet was malfunctioning. 2, this troll was deaf as the proverbial post. Unfortunately, Holly had no way of knowing as the tones were inaudible to fairy ears. Whatever the problem, it forced Holly to adopt a strategy she would rather not have resorted to. Direct contact. All to save a human's life. She'd gone Section 8. Without a doubt. Holly jerked the throttle, straight from fourth to reverse. Not very good for the gears. She'd get a dressing down from the mechanics for that, in the unlikely event she actually survived this never-ending nightmare. The effect of this gear crunching was to flip her around in mid-air, so that her boot heels were pointed directly at the troll's head. Holly winced. 2 entanglements with the same troll. Unbelievable. Her heels caught the beast square on the crown of its head. At that speed, there was at least half a ton of G-force behind the contact. Only the reinforced ribbing in her suit prevented Holly's leg bones from shattering. Even so, she heard her knee pop. The pain clawed its way to her forehead. Ruined her recovery maneuver too. Instead of rappelling herself to a safe altitude, Holly crumpled onto the troll's back, becoming instantly entangled in the ropey fur. The troll was suitably annoyed. Not only had something distracted it from dinner, but now that something was nestled in its fur, along with the cleaner slugs. The beast straightened, reaching a clawed hand over its own shoulder. The curved nails raked Holly's helmet, scoring parallel grooves in the alloy. Juliet was safe for the moment, but Holly had taken her place on the endangered individuals list. The troll squeezed tighter, somehow securing a grip on the helmet's anti-friction coating, which, according to Foley, was impossible to grip. Serious words would be had. If not in this life, then definitely the next. Captain Short found herself being hoisted aloft to face her old enemy. Holly struggled to concentrate through the pain and confusion. Her leg was swinging like a pendulum, and the troll's breath was breaking over her face in rancid waves. There had been a plan, hadn't there? Surely she didn't fly down here just to curl up and die. There must have been a strategy. All those years in the academy must have taught her something. Whatever her plan had been, it floated just out of reach somewhere between pain and shock. Out of reach. The lights, Holly. A voice in her head. Probably talking to herself. An out-of-head experience. Ha ha. She must remember to tell Foley about this. Foley. Hit the lights, Holly. If those tusks get to work, you'll be dead before the magic can kick in. Foley. Is that you? Holly may have said this aloud, or she may just have thought it. She wasn't sure. The tunnel-high beams, Captain, a different voice. Not so cuddly. Hit the button now, that's an order, oops. It was Root. She was falling down on the job again. First Hamburg, then Martina Franca, now this. Yes sir, she mumbled, trying to sound professional. Press it now, Captain Short. Holly looked the troll straight in its merciless eyes and pressed the button. Very melodramatic. Or it would have been, if the lights had worked. Unfortunately for Holly, in her haste she'd grabbed one of the helmets cannibalized by Artemis Fowl. Hence no sonics, no filters, and no tunnel beams. The halogen bulbs were still installed, but the wires had come loose during Artemis's investigations. Oh, dear, breathed Holly. Oh, dear, barked Root. What's that supposed to mean? The beams are offline, explained Foley. Oh. Root's voice trailed off. What more was there to say? Holly squinted at the troll. If you didn't know trolls were dumb animals, you'd swear the beast was grinning. Standing there with blood dripping from various chest wounds, grinning. Captain Short didn't like being grinned at. Laugh this off, she said, and butted the troll with the only weapon available to her. Her helmeted head. Valiant undoubtedly, but about as effective as trying to cut down a tree with a feather. Luckily, the ill-advised blow had a side effect. For a split second, two strands of conductor filament connected, sending power flooding to one of the tunnel beams. 400 watts of white light blasted through the troll's crimson eyes, dispatching lightning rods of agony to the brain. Hey hey, mumbled Holly, in the second before the troll convulsed involuntarily. Its spasms sent her spinning across the parquet floor, leg jittering along behind her. The wall was approaching at an alarming speed. Maybe, thought Holly hopefully, this will be one of those impacts where you don't feel any pain until later. No, replied her pessimistic side, afraid not. She slammed into a Norman narrative tapestry, bringing it tumbling down on top of her. Pain was immediate and overwhelming. Oof, grunted Foley. I felt that. Visuals are shot. Pain sensors went right off the scale. Your lungs are busted, Captain. We're going to lose you for a while. But don't worry, Holly, your magic should be kicking in already. Holly felt the blue tingle of magic scurrying to her various injuries. Thank the gods for acorns. But it was too little too late. The pain was way beyond her threshold. Just before unconsciousness claimed her, Holly's hand flopped from beneath the tapestry. It landed on Butler's arm, touching the bare skin. Amazingly, the human wasn't dead. A dog pulse forced the blood through smashed limbs. Heal, thought Holly. And the magic scurried down her fingers. The troll faced a dilemma: which female to eat first? Choices, choices. This decision was not made any easier by the lingering agony buzzing around its shaggy head, or the cluster of bullets lodged in the fatty chest tissue. Eventually it settled on the surface dweller. Soft human meat. No dense fairy muscle to chew through. The beast squatted low, tilting the girl's chin with one yellowed talon. A pulsing jugular looped lazily down the length of her neck. The heart or the neck? The troll wondered. The neck, it was closer. It turned the talons sideways, so that the edge pressed against soft human flesh. One sharp swipe and the girl's own heartbeat would drive the blood from her body. Butler woke up, which was a surprise in itself. He knew immediately that he was alive, because of the searing pain permeating every cubic centimeter of his body. This was not good. Alive he may have been, but considering the fact that his neck had a 180 twist on it, he'd never so much as walk the dog again, not to mention rescue his sister. The manservant twiddled his fingers. Hurt like hell, but at least there was movement. It was amazing that he had any motor functions at all, considering the trauma his spinal column had suffered. His toes seemed all right too, but that could have been phantom response, given that he couldn't actually see them. The bleeding from his chest wound appeared to have stopped and he was thinking straight. All in all, he was in much better shape than he had any right to be. What in heaven's name was going on here? Butler noticed something. There were blue sparks dancing along his torso. He must be hallucinating, creating pleasant images to distract himself from the inevitable. A very realistic hallucination, it must be said. The sparks congregated at trauma points, sinking into the skin. Butler shuddered. This was no hallucination. Something extraordinary was happening here. Magical. Magic. That rang a bell in his recently reassembled cranium. Fairy magic. Something was healing his wounds. He twisted his head, wincing at the grate of sliding vertebrae. There was a hand resting on his forearm. Sparks flowed from the slim elfin fingers, intuitively targeting bruises, breaks, or ruptures. There were a lot of injuries to be dealt with, but the tiny sparks handled it all quickly and effectively. Like an army of mystical beavers repairing storm damage. Butler could actually feel his bones knitting and the blood retreating from semi-congaled scabs. His head twisted involuntarily as his vertebrae slid into their niches, and strength returned in a rush as magic reproduced the 3 liters of blood lost through his chest wound. Butler jumped to his feet, actually jumped. He was himself again. No, it was more than that. He was as strong as he had ever been. Strong enough to have another crack at that beast hunkered over his baby sister. He felt his rejuvenated heart speed up like the stroke of an outboard motor. Calm, Butler told himself. Passion is the enemy of efficiency. But calm or no, the situation was desperate. This beast had already effectively killed him once, and this time he didn't even have the Sig Sauer. His own skills aside, it would be nice to have a weapon. Something with a bit of weight to it. His boot clinked on a metallic object. Butler glanced down at the debris strewn in the troll's wake. Perfect. There was nothing but snow on the view screen. Come on, urged Root. Hurry up, Foley elbowed past his superior. Maybe if you didn't insist on blocking all the circuit boards. Root shuffled out of the way grudgingly. In his mind it was the circuit board's fault for being behind him. The centaur's head disappeared into an access panel. Anything, nothing. Just interference. Root slapped the screen. Not a good idea. First, because there was not one chance in a million that it could actually help, and second, because plasma screens grow extremely hot after prolonged use. Darvit, don't touch that screen, by the way. Oh, ha ha. We have time for jokes now, do we? No, actually. Anything. The snow settled into recognizable shapes. That's it, hold it there. We've got a signal. I've activated the secondary camera. Plain old video, I'm afraid, but it'll have to do. Root didn't comment. He was watching the screen. This must be a movie. It couldn't be real life. So what's going on in there? Anything interesting? Root tried to answer, but his soldier's vocabulary just didn't have the superlatives. What is it? The commander made an attempt. It's the human. I've never. ... Oh, forget it, Foley. You're going to have to see this for yourself. Holly watched the entire episode through a gap in the tapestry folds. If she hadn't seen it, she wouldn't have believed it. In fact, it wasn't until she'd reviewed the video for her report that she was certain the whole thing wasn't a hallucination brought on by a near-death experience. As it was, the video sequence became something of a legend, initially doing the rounds on the amateur home movies cable shows and ending up on the LEP Academy hand-to-hand curriculum. The human, Butler, was strapping on a medieval suit of armor. Incredible as it seemed, he apparently intended going toe-to-toe with the troll. Holly tried to warn him, tried to make some sound, but the magic hadn't yet reinflated her crushed lungs. Butler closed his visor, hefting a vicious mace. Now, he grunted through the grill. I'll show you what happens when someone lays a hand on my sister. The human twirled the mace as though it were a cheerleader's baton, ramming it home between the troll's shoulder blades. A blow like that, while not fatal, certainly distracted the troll from its intended victim. Butler planted his foot just above the creature's haunches and tugged the weapon free. It relinquished its grip with a sickly sucking sound. He skipped backward, settling into a defensive stance. The troll rounded on him, all 10 talons sliding out to their full extent. Drops of venom glistened from the tip of each tusk. Playtime was over, but there would be no lightning strike this time. The beast was wary, it had been hurt. This latest attacker would be afforded the same respect as another male of the species. As far as the troll was concerned, his territory was being encroached on. And there was only one way of solving a dispute of this nature. The same way that trolls solved every dispute. ... I must warn you, said Butler, straight-faced. I am armed and prepared to use deadly force if necessary. Holly would have groaned if she could. Banter the human was trying to engage a troll in macho repartee, then Captain Short realized her mistake. The words weren't important, it was the tone he employed. Calm, soothing. Like a trainer with a spooked unicorn. Step away from the female. Easy, now. The troll ballooned its cheeks and howled. Scare tactics. Testing the waters. Butler didn't flinch. Yeah. Real scary. Now just back out of the door and I won't have to cut you into little pieces. The troll snorted, miffed by this reaction. Generally his roar sent whatever creature was facing it scurrying down the tunnel. One step at a time. Nice and slow. Easy there, big fellow. You could almost see it in the troll's eyes. A flicker of uncertainty. Maybe this human was. And that was when Butler struck. He danced under the tusks, hammering home a devastating uppercut with his medieval weapon. The troll staggered backward, talons flailing wildly. But it was too late. Butler had stepped out of reach, scooting across to the other side of the corridor. The troll lumbered after him, spitting dislodged teeth from pulped gums. Butler sank to his knees, sliding and turning, the polished floor bearing him like an ice skater. He ducked and pirouetted, facing his pursuer. Guess what I found, he said, raising the Sig Sauer. No chest shots this time. Butler laid in the rest of the automatics clip in a 10 cm diameter between the troll's eyes. Unfortunately for Butler, due to millennia spent butting each other, trolls have developed a thick ridge of bone covering their brows. So his textbook spread failed to penetrate the skull, in spite of the Teflon-coated load. However, 10 Devastator slugs can't be ignored by any creature on the planet, and the troll was no exception. The bullets beat a sledgehammer tattoo on its cranium, causing instant concussion. The animal staggered backward, slapping at its own forehead. Butler was after it in a heartbeat, pinning one shaggy foot beneath the mace spikes. The troll was concussed, blinded by blood, and lame. A normal person would feel a shard of remorse, but not Butler. He'd seen too many men go red by injured animals. Now was the dangerous time. It was no time for mercy, it was time to terminate with extreme prejudice. Holly could only watch helplessly as the human took careful aim and delivered a series of crippling blows to the stricken creature. First he took out the tendons, bringing the troll to its knees. Then he abandoned the mace and went to work with gauntleted hands, perhaps deadlier than the mace had been. The unfortunate troll fought back pathetically, even managing to land a few glancing blows. But they failed to penetrate the antique armor. Meanwhile Butler toiled like a surgeon. Working on the assumption that the troll and human physiques were basically the same, he rained blow after blow on the dumb creature, reducing it to a heap of quivering fur in so many seconds. It was pitiful to watch. And the manservant wasn't finished yet. He stripped off the bloodied gauntlets, loading a fresh clip into the handgun. "Let's see how much bone you have under your chin." "No," gasped Holly, with the first breath in her body. "Don't." Butler ignored her, jamming the barrel beneath the troll's jaw. "Don't do it. ... You owe me." Butler paused. Juliet was alive, it was true. Confused certainly, but alive. He thumbed the hammer on his pistol. Every brain cell in his head screamed for him to pull the trigger. But Juliet was alive. "You owe me, human." Butler sighed. He'd regret this later. "Very well, Captain. The beast lives to fight another day. Lucky for him, I'm in a good mood." Holly made a noise. It was somewhere between a whimper and a chuckle. "Now let's get rid of our hairy friend." Butler rolled the unconscious troll onto an armored trolley, dragging it to the devastated doorway. With a huge heave, he jettisoned the lot into the suspended night. 9. Ace in the hole. Artemis tried the doorknob and got a scorched palm for his trouble. Sealed. The fairy must have blasted it with her weapon. Very astute. One less variable in the equation. It was exactly what he himself would have done. Artemis did not waste any time attempting to force open the door. It was reinforced steel, and he was 12. You didn't have to be a genius to figure it out, even though he was. Instead, the foul heir apparent crossed to the monitor wall and followed developments from there. He knew immediately what the LEP were up to: send in the troll to secure a cry for help, interpret it as an invitation, and next thing you know a brigade of goblin stormtroopers were taking the manor. Clever. And unanticipated. It was the second time he'd underestimated his opponents. One way or another, there wouldn't be a third. As the drama below unfolded on the monitors, Artemis's emotions jumped from terror to pride. Butler had done it. Defeated the troll, and without a single plea for aid passing his lips. Watching the display, Artemis appreciated fully, perhaps for the first time, the service provided by the Butler family. Artemis activated the tri-band radio, broadcasting on revolving frequencies. "Commander Root, you are monitoring all channels, I presume. ... Quote. For a few moments nothing but white noise emanated from the micro speakers, then Artemis heard the sharp click of a mic button. "I hear you, human. What can I do for you?" Is that the commander? A noise filtered through the black gauze. It sounded like a whinny. No, this is not the commander. This is Foley, the centaur. Is that the kidnapping lowlife human? It took Artemis a moment to process the fact that he'd been insulted. Mr. R. Foley, you have obviously not studied your psych texts. It is not wise to antagonize the hostage taker. I may be unstable. May be unstable. There's no may about it. Not that it matters. Soon you'll be no more than a cloud of radioactive molecules. Artemis chuckled. That's where you are mistaken, my quadruped friend. By the time that biobomb is detonated, I will be long gone from this time stop. It was Foley's turn to chuckle. You're bluffing, human. If there was a way to escape the field, I would have found it. I think you're talking through your. Thankfully it was at that moment Root took over at the microphone. Fowl. This is Commander Root. What do you want? I would just like to inform you, Commander, that in spite of your attempted betrayal, I am still willing to negotiate. That troll had nothing to do with me, protested Root. It was done against my wishes. The fact is that it was done, and by the lep. Whatever trust we had is gone. So here is my ultimatum. You have 30 minutes to send in the gold, or else I will refuse to release Captain Short. Furthermore, I will not take her with me when I leave the time field, leaving her to be disintegrated by the bio-bomb. Don't be a fool, human. You're deluding yourself. Mud technology is eons behind ours. There is no way to escape the time field. Artemis leaned in close to the mic, smiling his wolfish smile. There's only one way to find out, Root. Are you willing to bet Captain Short's life on your hunch? Root's hesitation was highlighted by the hiss of interference. His reply, when it came, was tinged with just the right note of defeat. No, he sighed. I'm not. You'll have your gold, Fowl. A ton. 24 carat. Artemis smirked. Quite the actor, our Commander Root. 30 minutes, Commander. Count the seconds if your clock's stopped. I'm waiting. But not for long. Artemis terminated the contact, settling back in the swivel chair. It would seem as though the bait had been taken. No doubt the LEP analysts had discovered his accidental invitation. The fairies would pay up because they believed the gold would be theirs again as soon as he was dead. Vaporized by the bio-bomb. Which, of course, he wouldn't be. In theory. Butler put 3 rounds into the door frame. The door itself was steel and would have sent the Devastator slugs ricocheting straight back at him. But the frame was the original porous stone used to build the manor. It crumbled like chalk. A very basic security flaw, and one that would have to be remedied once this business was over. Master Artemis was waiting calmly in his chair by the monitor bank. Nice work, Butler. Thank you, Artemis. We were in trouble for a moment there. If it hadn't been for the captain. ... Artemis nodded. Yes. I saw. Healing, one of the fairy arts. I wonder why she did it. I wonder too, said Butler softly. We certainly didn't deserve it. Artemis glanced up sharply. Keep the faith, old friend. The end is in sight. Butler nodded. He even attempted a smile. But even though there were plenty of teeth in the grin, there was no heart. In less than an hour, Captain Short will be back with her people and we will have sufficient funds to relaunch some of our more tasteful enterprises. I know. It's just. ... Artemis didn't have to ask. He knew exactly what Butler was feeling. The fairy had saved both their lives and yet he insisted on holding her to ransom. To a man of honor like Butler, this was almost more than he could bear. The negotiations are over. One way or another she will be returned to her kind. No harm will befall Captain Short. You have my word. And Juliet? Yes. Is there any danger to my sister? No, no danger. The fairies are just going to give us this gold and walk away. Artemis snorted gently. No, not exactly. They're going to bomb Fowl Manor. The second captain short is clear. Butler took a breath to speak, but hesitated. Obviously there was more to the plan. Master Fowl would tell him when he needed to know. So instead of quizzing his employer, he made a simple statement. I trust you, Artemis. Yes, replied the boy, the weight of that trust etched on his brow. I know. Cudgeon was doing what politicians did best, trying to duck responsibility. Your officer helped the humans, he blurted, mustering as much indignation as possible. The entire operation was proceeding exactly as planned, until your female attacked our deputy. Deputy, chortled Foley. Now the troll's a deputy. Yes. He is. And that human made mincemeat of him. This entire situation could be wrapped up if it wasn't for your department's incompetence. Ordinarily, Root would have blown his top at this point, but he knew that Cudgeon was grasping at straws, desperately trying to save his career. So the commander just smiled. Hey, Foley. Yes, Commander. Did we get the troll assault on disc? The centaur heaved a dramatic sigh. No, sir, we ran out of discs just before the troll went in. What a pity. A real shame. Those discs could have been invaluable to acting Commander Cudgeon at his hearing. Cudgeon's cool went out the window. Give me those discs, Julius the First. No, they're in there. This is blatant obstruction. You're the only one guilty of obstruction around here, Cudgeon. Using this affair to further your own career. Cudgeon's face took on a hue to match Root's own. The situation was slipping away from him and he knew it. Even Chick's Verbal and the other sprites were sidling out from behind their leader. I am still in charge here, Julius, so hand over those discs or I will have you detained. Oh, really? You and whose army? For a second Cudgeon's face glowed with the old pomposity. It evaporated the moment he noticed the conspicuous lack of officers at his shoulders. That's right, snickered Foley. You ain't acting commander anymore. The call came through from below. You've got an appointment with the council, and I don't think it's to offer you a seat. It was probably Foley's grin that drove Cudgeon over the edge. Give me those discs, he roared, pinning Foley to the operations shuttle. Root was tempted to let them wrestle for a while, but now wasn't the time to indulge himself. Naughty naughty, he said, pointing his index finger at Cudgeon. No one beats Foley but me. Foley paled. Careful with that finger. You're still wearing the. Root's thumb accidentally brushed his knuckle, opening a tiny gas valve. The released gas propelled a tranquilized dart through the latex fingertip and straight into Cudgeon's neck. The acting commander, soon to be private, sank like a stone. Foley rubbed his neck. Nice shot, Commander. I don't know what you're talking about. Total accident. I forgot all about the fake finger. There are several precedents, I believe. Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately, Cudgeon will be unconscious for several hours. By the time he awakens, all the excitement will be over. Shame. Root allowed himself a fleeting grin, then it was back to business. Is the gold here? Yep, they just inserted it. Good. He called to Cudgeon's sheepish troops. Get it loaded on a hover trolley, and send it in. Any trouble and I'll feed you your wings. Understood. No one actually replied, but it was understood. No doubt about it. Good. Now hop to it. Root disappeared into the operations shuttle, Foley clopping behind him. The commander shut the door firmly. Is it armed? The centaur flicked a few important-looking switches on the main console. It is now. I want it launched as soon as possible. He glanced through the laser-proof refractor glass. We're down to minutes here. I see sunlight poking through. Foley bent to his keyboard in earnest. The magic is breaking up. In 15 minutes we're going to be in the middle of overground daytime. The neutrino streams are losing their integrity. I see, said Root, which was basically a lie again. Okay, I don't see. But I do get the 15 minutes bit. That gives you 10 minutes to get Captain Short out of there. After that we're going to be sitting ducks for the entire human race. Foley activated yet another camera. This one was linked to the hover trolley. He ran a finger experimentally across a trackpad. The trolley shot forward, almost decapitating Chick's verbal. Nice driving, muttered Root. Will it get up the steps? Foley didn't even look up from his computers. Automatic clearance compensator. A 5-foot collar. No problems. Root speared him with a glare. You do that just to annoy me, don't you? Foley shrugged his shoulders. I might. Yes, well, count yourself lucky my other fingers aren't loaded. Get my meaning? Yes, ear. Good. Now let's bring Captain Short home. Holly hovered beneath the portico. Orange shards of light striped the blue. The time stop was breaking up. There were only minutes left before Root Blue rinsed the whole place. Foley's voice buzzed in her earpiece. Okay, Captain Short. The gold is on the way. Be ready to move. We don't bargain with kidnappers, said Holly, surprised. What's going on here? Nothing, replied Foley casually. Straightforward exchange. The gold goes in, you come out. We send in the missile. Big blue bang, and it's all over. Does Fowl know about the bio-bomb? Yep. Knows all about it. Claims he can escape the time field. That's impossible. Correct. But they'll all be killed, big deal, retorted Foley, and Holly could almost see him shrug. That's what you get when you mess with the people. Holly was torn. There was no doubt that Fowl was a danger to the civilized underworld. Very few tears would be shed over his body. But the girl, Juliet, she was an innocent. She deserved a chance. Holly descended to an altitude of 6.5 feet. Head height for Butler. The humans had congregated in the wreckage that used to be a hallway. There was disunity between them. The LEP officer could sense it. Holly glared accusingly at Artemis. Have you told them? Artemis returned her stare. Told them what? Yes, Fairy, told us what? Echoed Juliet belligerently, still a bit miffed over the mesmerizing. Don't play dumb, Fowl. You know what I'm talking about. Artemis never could play dumb for very long. Yes, Captain Short. I do. The bio-bomb. Your concern would be touching, if it extended to myself. Nevertheless, do not upset yourself. Everything is proceeding according to plan. According to plan, gasped Holly, pointing to the devastation surrounding them. Was this part of the plan? And Butler almost getting killed, all part of the plan? No, Artemis admitted. The troll was a slight blip. But irrelevant to the overall scheme. Holly resisted the urge to punch the pale human again, turning instead to Butler. Listen to reason, for heaven's sake. You cannot escape the time field. It has never been done. Butler's features could have been etched in stone. If Artemis says it can be done, then it can. But your sister, are you willing to risk her life out of loyalty to a felon? Artemis is no felon, miss, he is a genius. Now please remove yourself from my sightline. I am monitoring the main entrance. Holly buzzed up to 20 feet. You're crazy. All of you in 5 minutes you'll all be dust. Don't you realize? Artemis sighed. You've had your answer, Captain. Now, please. This is a delicate stage in the proceedings. Proceedings. It's a kidnapping, at least have the guts to call it what it is. Artemis's patience was beginning to fray. Butler, do we have any tranquilizer hypodermics left? The giant manservant nodded, but didn't speak. At that precise moment, if the order came to sedate, he wasn't. The giant manservant nodded, but didn't speak. At that precise moment, if the order came to sedate, he wasn't sure if he would, or could. Luckily Artemis's attention was diverted by activity in the avenue. It would seem the LEP have capitulated. Butler, supervise the delivery. But stay alert. Our fairy friends are not above trickery. You're a fine one to talk, muttered Holly. Butler hurried to the demolished doorway, checking the load and catch on his Sig Sauer 9mm. He was almost grateful for some military activity to distract him from his dilemma. In situations like these, training took over. There was no room for sentiment. A fine haze of dust still hung in the air. Butler squinted through it, into the avenue beyond. The fairy filters rigged over his eyes revealed that there were no warm bodies approaching. There was, however, a large trolley seemingly driving itself up to the front door. It was floating on a cushion of shimmering air. Doubtless Master Artemis would have understood the physics of this machine. All Butler cared about was whether or not he could disable it. The trolley bumped into the first step. Automatic compensator, my foot, snorted Root. Yeah, replied Foley. I'm working on it. It's the ransom, shouted Butler. Artemis tried to quell the excitement rising in his chest. This was not the time to allow emotions to enter the equation. Check for booby traps. Butler stepped cautiously onto the porch. Shards of disintegrated gargoyle lay scattered beneath his feet. No hostiles. Seems to be self-propelled. The trolley lurched over the steps. I don't know who's driving this thing, but he could do with a few lessons. Butler bent low to the ground, scanning the trolley's underside. No explosive devices visible. He extracted a sweeper from his pocket, extending the telescopic aerial. No bugs either. Nothing detectable at any rate. But what do we have here? Oh, said Foley. It's a camera. Butler reached in, pulling the fisheye lens out by the cable. Nighty-night, gentlemen. In spite of the load it carried, the trolley responded easily to Butler's touch, gliding across the threshold into the lobby. It stood there humming softly, as though waiting to be unloaded. Now that the moment had come, Artemis was almost afraid to seize it. It was hard to believe that after all these months, his wicked scheme was minutes away from fruition. Of course these last few minutes were the vital ones, and the most dangerous. Open it, he said at last, surprised at the tremble in his own voice. It was an irresistible instant. Juliet approached tentatively, spangled eyes wide. Even Holly closed the throttle a notch, dropping until her feet brushed the marble tiling. Butler unzipped the black tarpaulin, dragging it back across the cargo. Nobody said a thing. Artemis imagined that somewhere the 1812 overture was playing. The gold sat there, stacked in shining rows. It seemed to have an aura, a warmth, but also an inherent danger. There were a lot of people willing to die or kill for the unimaginable wealth this gold could bring. Holly was mesmerized. Fairies have an affinity for minerals, they are of the earth. But gold was their favorite. Its luster, its allure. They paid, she breathed. I can't believe it. Neither can I, murmured Artemis. Butler, is it real? Butler hefted a bar from the stack. He dug the tip of a throwing knife into the ingot, gouging out a small sliver. It's real all right, he said, holding the scraping up to the light. This one, at any rate. Good. Very good. Begin unloading it, would you? We'll send the trolley back out with Captain Short. Hearing her name dispelled Holly's gold fever. Artemis, give it up. No human has ever succeeded in keeping fairy gold. And they've been trying for centuries. The LEP will do anything to protect their property. Artemis shook his head. Amused. I've told you. Holly took him by the shoulders. You cannot escape, don't you understand? The boy returned her gaze coolly. I can escape, Holly. Look in my eyes and tell me that I can't." So she did. Captain Holly Short gazed into her captor's blue-black eyes, and she saw the truth in there. And for a moment she believed it. "There's still time," she said desperately. "There must be something. I have magic." A crease of annoyance wrinkled the boy's brow. "I hate to disappoint you, Captain, but there is absolutely nothing." Artemis paused, his gaze tugged momentarily upstairs to the converted loft. Perhaps, he thought. Do I really need all this gold? And was his conscience not needling him, leeching some of the sweetness from his victory? He shook himself. Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. No emotion. Artemis felt a familiar hand on his shoulder. Everything all right? Yes, butler. Keep unloading. Get Juliet to help. I need to talk to Captain Short. Are you sure there's nothing wrong? Artemis sighed. No, old friend, I'm not sure. But it's too late now. Butler nodded, returning to his task. Juliet toddled along behind him like a terrier. Now, Captain, about your magic. What about it? Holly's eyes were hooded with suspicion. What would I have to do to buy a wish? Holly glanced at the trolley. Well, that depends. What do you have to bargain with? Route was not what you'd call relaxed. Increasingly wide bands of yellow light were poking through the blue. Minutes left. Minutes. His migraine was not helped by the pungent cigar feeding toxins into his system. Have all non-essential personnel been evacuated? Unless they've sneaked back in since the last time you asked me. Not now, Foley. Believe me, now is not the time. Anything from Captain Short? Nope. We lost video after the troll thing. I'd guess the battery is ruptured. We'd better get that helmet off her ASAP, or the radiation will fry her brain. That'd be a pity after all this work. Foley returned to his console. A red light began pulsing gently. Wait, motion sensor. We've got activity by the main entrance. Route crossed to the screens. Can you enhance it? No problem. Foley punched in the coordinates, blowing it up 400%. Root sat down on the nearest chair. Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? You sure are. Foley chuckled. This is even better than the suit of armor. Holly was coming out. With the gold. Retrieval was on her in half a second. Let's get you out of the danger zone, Captain, urged a sprite, catching Holly by the elbow. Another ran a rad sensor over her helmet. We've got a power source breach here, Captain. We need to get your head sprayed immediately. Holly opened her mouth to protest, and had it instantly filled with rad suppressant foam. Can't this wait? She spluttered. Sorry, Captain. Time is of the essence. The commander wants a debriefing before we detonate. Holly was rushed toward the mobile ops unit, her feet barely touching the ground. All around her retrieval cleaners scanned the grounds for any trace of the siege. Techies dismantled the field dishes, making ready to pull the plug. Grunts steered the trolley toward the portal. It was imperative that everything be relocated to a safe distance before the biobomb went in. Root was waiting on the steps. Holly, he blurted. I mean, Captain. You made it. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And the gold too. This is a real feather in your cap. Well, not all, Commander. About half, I think. Root nodded. No matter. We'll have the rest soon enough. Holly wiped rad foam from her brow. I've been thinking about that, sir. Fowl made a mistake. He never ordered me not to re-enter the house, and seeing as he brought me in there in the first place, the invitation still stands. I could go in and mind-wipe the occupants. We could hide the gold in the walls and do another time stop tomorrow night. Quote. No, Captain. But, sir. Quote. Root's features regained whatever tension they'd lost. No, Captain. The council is not about to hold off for some kidnapping mud man. It's just not going to happen. I have my orders, and believe me, they're written in stone. Holly trailed Root into the mobile. But the girl, sir. She's an innocent casualty of war. She threw her lot in with the wrong side. Nothing can be done for her now. Holly was incredulous. A casualty of war? How can you say that? A life is a life. Root spun sharply, grasping her by the shoulders. You did what you could, Holly, he said. No one could have done more. You even retrieved most of the ransom. You're suffering from what humans call Stockholm Syndrome. You have bonded with your captors. Don't worry, it will pass. But those people in there, they know about us. Nothing can save them now. Foley looked up from his calculations. Not true. Technically. Welcome back, by the way. Holly couldn't spare even a second to return the greeting. What do you mean not true? I'm fine, seeing as you asked. Foley, shouted Root and Holly in unison. Well, like the book says, if the mud man gold can gather, in spite of magic or fairy glamour, then that gold is his to keep, until he lies in eternal sleep. So if he lives, he wins. It's that simple. Not even the council will go against the book. Root scratched his chin. Should I be worried? Foley laughed mirthlessly. No, those guys are as good as dead. As good as isn't good enough. Is that an order? Affirmative, soldier. I'm not a soldier, said Foley, and pressed the button. Butler was more than a little surprised. You gave it back. Artemis nodded. About half. We still have quite a nest egg. About $15 million at today's market prices. Butler usually wouldn't ask. But this time he had to. Why, Artemis? Can you tell me? I suppose so. The boy smiled. I felt we owed the captain something. For services rendered. Is that all? Artemis nodded. No need to talk about the wish. It could be perceived as weakness. Said Butler, smarter than he looked. Now, we should celebrate, enthused Artemis, deftly changing the subject. Some champagne, I think. The boy strode to the kitchen before Butler's gaze could dissect him. By the time the others caught up, Artemis had already filled 3 glasses with Dom Perignon. I'm a minor, I know, but I'm sure Mother wouldn't mind. Just this once. Butler felt that something was afoot. Nevertheless, he took the crystal flute offered to him. Juliet looked at her big brother. Is this okay? I suppose so. He took a breath. You know I love you, don't you, sis? Juliet scowled, something else that the local louts found very endearing. She smacked her brother on the shoulder. You're so emotional for a bodyguard. Butler looked his employer straight in the eye. You want us to drink this, don't you, Artemis? Artemis met his gaze squarely. Yes, Butler. I do. Without another word, Butler drained his glass. Juliet followed suit. The manservant tasted the tranquilizer immediately, and although he would have had ample time to snap Artemis Fowl's neck, he didn't. No need for Juliet to be distressed in her final moments. Artemis watched his friends sink to the floor. A pity to deceive them. But if they had been alerted to the plan, their anxiety could have counteracted the sedative. He gazed at the bubbles swirling in his own glass. Time for the most audacious step in his scheme. With only the barest hint of hesitation, he swallowed the tranquilizer-laced champagne. Artemis waited calmly for the drug to take hold of his system. He didn't have to wait long, since each dose had been calculated according to body weight. As his thoughts began to swirl, it occurred to him that he might never awaken again. It's a bit late for doubts, he chided himself, and sank into unconsciousness. Holly swept the area with an X-ray scanner. Nothing under the flagstones but dirt, and a nest of dead money spiders. Clear, she said into her microphone. I'm going in. Foley, have you got your ears on? I'm right there with you, darlin', replied the centaur. Unless you step on a landmine, in which case I'm way back in the operations room. Are you getting any thermals? Not after a blue rinse. We have residual heat signatures all over the place. Mostly selenium flares. It won't calm down for a couple of days. But no radiation, right? That's right. Root snorted in disbelief. Over the headsets it sounded like an elephant sneezing. It looks like we're going to have to sweep this house the old-fashioned way, he grumbled. Make it quick, advised Foley. I give it 5 minutes tops before Fowl Manor rejoins the world at large. Holly stepped through what used to be the doorway. The chandelier swung gently from the concussive force of the missile's detonation, but otherwise everything was as she remembered it. The gold is downstairs. In my cell. Nobody answered. Not in words. Someone did manage a retch. Right into the microphone. Holly spun around. Trouble was doubled over, clutching his stomach. I don't feel so good, he groaned. A tad unnecessarily, considering the pool of vomit all over his boots. Corporal Grubb took a breath, possibly to utter a sentence containing the word mommy. What came out was a jet of concentrated bile. Unfortunately, Grubb didn't have the opportunity to open his visor before the illness struck. It was not a pretty sight. Ugh, said Holly, pressing the corporal's visor release button. A tsunami of regurgitated rations flooded over Grubb's blackout suit. Oh, for heaven's sake, muttered Root, elbowing past the brothers. He didn't get very far. One step over the threshold and he was throwing up with the rest of them. Holly pointed her helmet cam at the stricken officers. What the hell is going on here, Foley? I'm searching. Hold on. Holly could hear computer keys being punched furiously. Okay. Sudden vomiting. Spatial nausea. ... Oh no. What? Asked Holly. But she already knew. Maybe she always had. It's the magic, blurted Foley, words barely decipherable in his excitement. They can't enter the house until Fowl is dead. It's like an extreme allergic reaction. That means, unbelievable, that means. ... They made it, completed Holly. He's alive. Artemis Fowl is alive. Darvit, groaned Root, and heaved another quart of vomit onto the terracotta tiles. Holly went on alone. She had to see for herself. If Fowl's corpse was here, it would be with the gold, of that she was certain. The same family portraits glared down at her, but now they seemed smug rather than austere. Holly was tempted to loose a few blasts into them from the Neutrino 2000. But that would be against the rules. If Artemis Fowl had beaten them, then that was it. There would be no recriminations. She descended the stairway to her cell. The door was still swinging slightly from the biobomb concussion. A selenium flare ricocheted around the room like a trapped bolt of blue lightning. Holly stepped inside, half afraid of what she might or might not see. There was nothing. Nothing dead at any rate. Just gold. 200 ingots approximately. Piled on the mattress of her cot. Nice neat military rows. Good old Butler, the only human ever to take on a troll and win. Commander. Are you receiving? Over. Affirmative, Captain. Body count. Negative on the bodies, sir. I found the rest of the ransom. There was a long silence. Leave it, Holly. You know the rules. We're pulling out. But, sir. There must be a way. Foley broke in on the conversation. But nothing, Captain. I'm counting down the seconds until daylight here, and I don't like our odds if we have to exit at high noon. Holly sighed. It made sense. The people could choose their exit time, as long as they left before the field disintegrated. It just galled her to think they'd been beaten by a human. An adolescent human at that. She took a last look around the cell. A big ball of hatred had been born here, she realized, and it would have to be dealt with sooner or later. Holly jammed her pistol back into its holster. Preferably sooner. Fowl was the winner this time, but someone like him wouldn't be able to rest on his laurels. He would be back with some other money-making scheme. And when he arrived, he would find Holly Short waiting for him. The sleeping pills. Very well. I had to think of a way to escape the time field. I trawled through the book, but there was nothing. Not a clue. The people themselves have not yet developed a way. So I went back to their Old Testament, back when their lives and ours were intertwined. You know the stories, elves that made shoes during the night, sprites that cleaned houses. Back when we coexisted to a certain extent. Magical favors in exchange for their fairy forts. The big one, of course, was Santa Claus. Butler's eyebrows nearly jumped off the front of his face. Santa Claus. Artemis raised his palms. I know. I was a tad skeptical myself. But apparently our little corporate image Santa Claus is not descended from a Turkish saint. He is a shadow of Santa Claus, the third king of the Frond-Elfen dynasty. He is known as San the Deluded. Not a great title, as titles go. Admittedly, de Claus thought that the greed of the mud people in his kingdom could be assuaged by distributing lavish gifts. He would marshal all the great wizards once a year and have them throw up a great time stop over vast regions. Flocks of sprites would be sent out to deliver the presents while the humans were asleep. Of course, it didn't work. Human greed can never be assuaged, especially not by gifts. Butler frowned. What if the humans, that is, ... What if we had woken up? Ah yes. Excellent question. The heart of the matter. We wouldn't wake up. That is the nature of the time stop. Whatever your state of consciousness going in, that's how you stay. You can neither wake up nor fall asleep. You must have noticed the fatigue in your bones these last few hours, yet your mind would not let you sleep. Butler nodded. Things were getting clearer, in a roundabout sort of way. So my theory was that the only way to escape the time field was to simply fall asleep. Our own consciousness was all that kept us imprisoned. You risked an awful lot on a theory, Artemis. Not just a theory. We did have a test subject. Who? Angeline. Yes. My mother. Because of her narcotic-induced slumber, she moved with the natural order of time, unhindered by the time field. If she had not, I would have simply surrendered to the LEP and submitted to their mind wipe. Butler snorted. He doubted it. So, because we could not fall asleep naturally, I simply administered us all a dose of mother's pills. Simple. You cut it pretty fine, though. Another minute. Agreed. The boy nodded. Things were tense there at the end. It was necessary in order to double bluff the LEP. He paused so that Butler could process the information. Well, am I forgiven? Butler sighed. On the chaise lounge, Juliet snored like a drunken sailor. He smiled suddenly. Yes, Artemis. All is forgiven. Just one thing. ... Yes. Never again. Fairies are too human. You're right, said Artemis, the crow's feet deepening around his eyes. Never again. We shall restrict ourselves to more tasteful ventures in the future. Legal, I can't promise. Butler nodded. It was close enough. Now, young master, shouldn't we check on your mother? Artemis grew paler, if that were possible. Could the captain have reneged on her promise? She would certainly be entitled to. Yes. I suppose we should. Let Juliet rest. She's earned it. He cast his eyes upward, along the stairs. It had been too much to hope for that he could trust the fairy. After all, he had held her captive against her will. He berated himself silently. Imagine parting with all those millions for the promise of a wish. Oh, the gullibility. Then the loft door opened. Butler drew his weapon instantly. Artemis, behind me. Intruders. The boy waved him away. No, Butler. I don't think so. His heart pounded in his ears, blood pulsed in his fingertips. Could it be? Could it possibly be? A figure appeared on the stairs. Wraith-like in a toweled robe, her hair wet from the shower. Artie, she called. Artie, are you there? Artemis wanted to answer, he wanted to race up the grand stairway, arms outstretched. But he couldn't. His cerebral functions had deserted him. Angeline Fowl descended, one hand resting lightly on the banister. Artemis had forgotten how graceful his mother was. Her bare feet skipped over the carpeted steps and soon she was standing before him. "Morning, darling," she said brightly, as though it were just another day. Mother," stammered Artemis. "Well, give me a hug." Artemis stepped into his mother's embrace. It was warm and strong. She was wearing perfume. He felt like the boy he was. "I'm sorry, Artie," she whispered into his ear. "Sorry for what?" "For everything. For the last few months, I haven't been myself. But things are going to change. Time to stop living in the past." Artemis felt a tear on his cheek. He wasn't sure whose tear it was. "And I don't have a present for you." "A present?" said Artemis. "Of course," sang his mother, spinning him around. "Don't you know what day it is?" "Day? It's Christmas Day, you silly boy. Christmas Day presents are traditional, are they not?" "Yes," thought Artemis. "Traditional. Sans de classe. And look at this place. Drab as a mausoleum." "Butler." The manservant hurriedly pocketed his Sig Sauer. "Yes, ma'am. Get on the phone to Brown Thomas. The platinum set number. Reopen my account. Tell Eileen I want a Yuletide makeover. The works." "Yes, ma'am. The works. Oh, and wake up Juliet. I want my things moved into the main bedroom. That attic is far too dusty." "Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." Angeline Fowl linked her son's arm. "Now, Artie, I want to know everything. First of all, what happened here?" "Remodeling," said Artemis. The old doorway was riddled with damp. Angeline frowned, completely unconvinced. "I see. And how about school? Have you decided on a career?" While his mouth answered these everyday questions, Artemis's mind was in turmoil. He was a boy again. His life was going to change utterly. His plans would have to be much more devious than usual if they were to escape his mother's attention. But it would be worth it. Angeline Fowl was wrong. She had brought him a Christmas present. Epilogue. Now that you have reviewed the case file, you must realize what a dangerous creature this Fowl is. There is a tendency to romanticize Artemis. To attribute to him qualities that he does not possess. The fact that he used his wish to heal his mother is not a sign of affection. He did it simply because the social services were already investigating his case, and it was only a matter of time before he was put into care. He kept the existence of the people quiet only so that he could continue to exploit them over the years, which he did on several occasions. His one mistake was leaving Captain Short alive. Holly became the LEP's foremost expert in the Artemis Fowl cases, and was invaluable in the fight against the people's most feared enemy. This fight was to continue across several decades. Ironically, the greatest triumph for both protagonists was the time they were forced to cooperate during the Goblin insurgents. But that's another story. Report compiled by Dr. J. Argan, B. Psych, for the LEP Academy files. Details are 94 accurate, 6 unavoidable extrapolation.